Hey guys, thanks for checking out Quick Sessions Podcast. My name is Garrett Terrio, coming to you from Houston, Texas, inside Timberline Fitness Studio. And today I want to talk about some psychological practices. That's what I've titled this one. And what I mean by that is go beyond saying you gotta get psyched up for something in the gym, okay? Because I think psyched up carries this meaning and expectation that I don't think is necessarily what you want all the time. And particularly to people who didn't grow up with some kind of team sport where they were in the gym with a large group of people. Because most people did not play football or basketball for their high school team, or even if they did, not all of them were in the weight room with a lot of their teammates. You know, you can be on a soccer team and maybe the soccer team didn't get privileged to the gym. Things like that happen. And I bring that up because when you think psyched up, I think a lot of people perceive it as go crazy, amp yourself up, get as excited as you can to go lift. And that's not necessarily the case. And I want to dive deeper into that psychological aspect of lifting, because like anything else in life, you shouldn't be too far one way or the other. There's a moderation to success when it comes to your psychological behavior when you're lifting weights. So to talk about this, I looked it up in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research because they just have everything. And sure enough, in the September 2015 issue, volume 29, issue 9, there's a great study done on achieving optimal performance through the use of cognitive behavioral strategies. And I'm going to just rattle these off word for word because the journal is full of doctors and other types of professionals, and I'd say it this way also. There's no need to really paraphrase or ad-lib this. The big ones they wanted to talk about when it comes to psychological practices is your emotional control, your arousal control, your mental imagery, your coping strategies, the goal setting strategies, which I think is the most common aspect of this that most people can relate to. And then, of course, the attention control and the development of your performance routines. So before I get into all this, I'll just preface what we're going to talk about, all those aspects and those different behavioral strategies, and talk about something that is called the arousal curve. Also, I go with anxiety curve when it comes to sports, but the arousal curve is essentially this inverted U shape. And just like anybody that's done a statistics class or calculus or anything like that, you understand these bell curves and there's outliers on either side and then there's a peak to it, right? An inverted U, nothing crazy scientific, but the idea is to stay at the peak of that U curve. And to get better is to shift that U curve, right? You don't want to keep going on the U curve because eventually you have diminishing returns, like anything else. So as far as the arousal curve is concerned, let me phrase it like this. Let's say the middle of the curve, the peak, that is the optimal arousal. That means you're not too psyched up, but you're also not too calm. So you need to find that perfect middle. Now, as you continue to get better at controlling that arousal, your curve shifts to the right. So let's say the peak of your curve was at a 6, and you keep hitting that 6 every day, every day, every day. Eventually, it's going to shift to where your peak is now at a 7, and then an 8. Same thing with the anxiety curve. The anxiety curve in sports is the level of pressure on you that allows you to still perform at your best. Some athletes need higher pressure to perform better. Some people don't. You can think of it as in basketball, there's no time left and you're down 1 and you have 2 free throws. Some people can perform under that pressure extremely well, and some people just can't. It doesn't mean they can't get the job done. It's just much more difficult for them, and the probability of getting the job done is lower, right? It's past their peak performance under pressure, so it's on the backside of the curve. It's the diminishing return side of the curve. So I know that's a long-winded talk about curves, but keep that in mind when we talk about all this stuff that I'm about to go over. So in this journal, the biggest strategies that they found was arousal management and skill acquisition. Now, we don't mean skill as in technique skill, lifting the weight. We're talking about mental skill acquisition. So let's start with arousal management, since we just covered it with the curve. You don't want too much, don't want too little. Now, how do you figure that out? Well, if you get too jacked up, pumped up, whatever you want to call it, your timing can suffer, your form can suffer, and that's why you don't want to go full crazy, right? You'll see the power lifters slapping themselves in the face and just getting wild, and those guys are the pros. All they do is lift weights. They know how to control their arousal and use it to their benefit. We are not those guys. No matter how long you train, you're never going to be power lifter, arousal, excellent. Now, if you train long enough, you don't even think about it. You know how to jack yourself up enough to take care of business. I would say myself, training my entire life, I can't imagine a level of psyched up to where I would not maintain correct form or anything like that. It's very rare that it's ever happened to me, but it does happen to people that aren't used to being in an environment like I grew up, right? I played football my entire life, so I grew up around getting on the bench press on max out day and having 50 other guys yelling and screaming, hitting on the chest, whatever we did in high school, right? The biggest thing, if someone's not used to that, and I've been guilty of it myself, is just telling someone to calm down. That's unpleasant in regular life without lifting weights. So imagine you're going to max out and someone's telling you to calm down as you're trying to get amped up for the lift. That does no help. What does calm down even mean? How much do you want me to calm down? That kind of stuff. So the one thing this journal dove into and figured out is, instead of telling them to not be as pumped up or as aroused, was to ask questions. Ask them, are you planting your feet? How's your shoulders feel? Anything you can do just to talk to them, to make them think. Are you going to explode off your chest? Whatever it is on the bench press, obviously. Make sure you get your depth. Anything. It doesn't even have to be questions. It could be just little phrases so that they can reach in their brain. And if they take their mind off the arousal, that kind of draws it back a little bit subconsciously. Now, another thing that helps is music. Music is something kind of on the other side. If they're not aroused enough and they just can't get motivated enough, sometimes music helps, because what it does is takes their mind off of the very uncomfortable task that's right in front of them. And with that somewhat distraction, I would call it, they're able to focus in, and just that focus will give them closer to peak arousal than had they been not having music and just thinking about the lift and getting stressed out and all that. So, I guess you can say stress is a big player in the arousal game. The more stressed you are, you're either going to be over aroused or under aroused, right? Peak arousal doesn't have stress. You're just amped up. Now, the second thing I'm going to talk about is the skill acquisition. And one of the best methods of this skill acquisition, remember, we're talking about mental cues as a skill, not the actual keep your elbows here, your feet here, butt back, whatever it is. The skill acquisition is all about the cues, and you want to almost talk to yourself, not like a crazy person, but you want to think, you want to focus, you want to zone in, right? You're aroused, you're amped up, and to kind of make sure you're in the middle of your arousal curve, you want to think, about the lift. Think about maybe one aspect of the lift. Like, for instance, if you're bench press, I might say, all right, drive the bar to your eyes, right? You're looking straight up the ceiling, lower the bar, get it right back to your eyes. With deadlifts, I always say push the world down with your feet. Squats, Tony Moffitt at LSU would say it, but rip the bar apart at the bottom of your squat, because that brings you back up, and it's a good way to keep your form while you're squatting. And even in sports, it doesn't have to be in the weightlifting world, but visualize the shot or the throw. Something if you played sports, you understand. So we've covered the skill acquisition and the arousal management. So the question is, how do we get there? I went over a couple, but what they found in this study is that the most prevalent theme to achieving both of these things is through confidence building. And confidence building is initiated through goal setting, which is probably the easiest of the 7 behavioral strategies I brought up in the beginning. And the reason that is important and successful is because through goal setting, specifically short-term goal setting, you start to build confidence. And when you start to build confidence in yourself, you become more self-efficient. It's as simple as that. It's not a weightlifting only thing either, right? Just in your regular professional life, setting goals helps. In fact, one thing I do is when someone's about to do a new personal best, or at least attempt, X amount of reps greater than they've ever done, sometimes I can see that they're not paying attention too much, I'll lie about the weight. So they think they're just going in and doing 250, but I actually have 260 on the bar. Something like that. Can't be a ton because you would notice it on the rack, but especially deadlifts. I'm known to throw a couple 10s on the side and they just don't notice it. And the reason to do that, we talked about stress earlier, is it lowers the stress when they think it's attainable, right? And there's nothing wrong with failing on a lift, but just the mental aspect of thinking something's attainable gives you lower stress. And with lower stress, you have a better chance of getting your best lift with peak arousal, right? So summed up with everything is increased confidence leads to increased chance of optimal arousal. So that's all summed up. With the arousal curve, you want to be right in the middle. The skills you get by just talking to yourself, focusing on the lift, just take one aspect of it. Just think about hit the bar on your chest if you're bench pressing. And that calms you down or picks you up, depending on what side you're on. It just focuses you more. And the more focused you are, the better chance you have about attaining peak arousal, especially if you listen to this podcast and you're thinking about it now. Guys, I hope this was some insight. I hope it helps. We don't talk about the mental side of weightlifting too often because, let's be honest, there's not that many different aspects of it. I know there's strategies different trainers use, but in general, there's not a broad spectrum of mental strategies that a lot of people use. The longer you lift, the better you'll get at all these, and you won't even think about it. But next time you're in the gym trying to get psyched up and you're just not great at it, just calm down, talk to yourself. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this one, a little different. If you have not, please visit the Apple Pod Center, subscribe, like, review, all that good stuff. I believe we're on iHeartRadio now, if that's where you get podcasts. Do the same there. It helps out. It helps the podcast grow. Once again, I'm Garrett Theriault. See you guys next time.